Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk to you about the Northern Ireland Practice Assessment Document, and as myself, Kathy and Lynn have named our baby NIPEC. So it's a term that we're living with every day, and hopefully you'll come to live with and love like we do. So in terms of the background, well, Francis has given you the background really to the whole Future Nurse, Future Midwife standards, and obviously Geraldine too from the NMC. And so we know those standards come out last year, and that there's an expectation that we are explicit about a renewed approach to education and to developing the nurses of the future in Northern Ireland and across the 4 countries of the UK. So we need to meet those standards by reviewing what we do and really engaging in something new and fresh, but bringing the expertise that we have from the past along with us as well. We know, obviously, that there's going to be very different roles in terms of practice supervisors, assessors and academic assessors, and we need to think about how that integrates into the practice assessment document as well. We know the expectation is that students will be more autonomous and take control of their learning, and that all builds in terms of their skills of being lifelong learners and being professional practitioners as well, and that this requires that their achievement is evidenced in some way, and so we really focused on how they're going to build evidence over the parts of their programme to evidence how they have developed and met the new proficiencies. So in Northern Ireland, we have decided we're going to capture that in one practice assessment document. So you'll all be familiar with things like portfolios, logbooks, etc., etc. We're bringing the whole lot together, and that the portfolio of evidence and all the records of learning, records of their practice learning experiences, etc., are all captured in one place and all feed forward into that assessment for that part of the programme. And as you've heard, we're developing that regional practice assessment document across the 3 AEIs, and as well, hopefully, the core that will work for the new midwifery standards as well. So what was the pathway that we took? Well, we have, as Francis said, had a number of engagement processes to really try and authentically engage in co-design so that we can really have something that everybody can buy into, hear all those voices, but also get some fresh thinking around the PAD and compared to what we've done before and what could we do differently, etc. And so we had 2 major engagement events to begin with. We started with a stakeholder survey, which we put out in November, and that had just 319 responses, which was really helpful. And a number of those came directly to the Patient Client Council, which we were really grateful for. So we got some very unique views really from the public. And the primary people who responded to the survey were students, existing mentors and lay people, although we did also have other people, academics in particular, respond as well. But we really wanted to hear that student voice, the current mentor voice, and the public opinion as well. And we followed that with a workshop on the 5th of December, which we had just under 100 people attend to work through some of that and work through some key issues around what we want to do with the PAD and some key issues that came up from the survey. So some of the key things that we came up with were the portfolio and the PAD would be one, as I've said, but it also must be something that's student-centred. So this is about helping someone, supporting someone through their development as well as assessing them. So the portfolios are often used as that key to access learning opportunities, setting out learning opportunities, etc. But we also wanted very much to reflect that person-centred context of learning and that person-centred context of practice. People have said in the survey in abundance about sometimes portfolios and documents and processes being complicated and language being maybe too academic. So in consultation with the groups that were developing the PAD in England, Scotland and Wales, the process there is largely been to take the proficiencies and map them to evidence types. So instead of somebody having to figure out what to do with the proficiencies and how to evidence them, we've done that bit of work in terms of mapping it out, and so that it's the learning and the learning journey that the student goes through that gets authenticated, but they automatically are addressing those proficiencies and accessing those learning opportunities and developing that evidence. And it takes away, I suppose, from that time that has to spend by current mentors in practice and students trying to decipher what a learning outcome is and how to meet that learning outcome. People generally wanted to remove complicated language and also wanted us to take performance indicators down to more simple things like yes, no, but define what a yes means and what a no means. And so we've done that. They asked colour code for each year so that it's obvious straight off what stage of or what part of the programme a student is on. To avoid a tick box process, because that generally has little value as a learning process for both students and for mentors to engage in. And we had a very, I suppose, unanimous request to separate guidance around the PAD from being in the PAD and create a bespoke handbook for that, which will be the next part of our work. I've mentioned the types of evidence, and then we also had quite a big discussion around whether we grade or whether we go achieved, not yet achieved, pass, fail. And really the very strong majority was on the achieved, not yet achieved, pass, fail side of things. And we also looked at how often we would summatively assess students in practice. So it's one summative assessment annually, which is one summative assessment per part of programme, is what we've come up with across the 3 universities. In terms of the evidence and what evidence is in there, when we went through this in detail in our workshops in particular, we already had the survey result that 78% of people wanted evidence to authenticate learning, and the reasons behind that is that it helped the registrants to be able to say, well, there's evidence that this person could do this in terms of standing over decisions. It took away some of the personal aspect in terms of whether this was opinion about whether somebody could do or couldn't do something, or whether they had developed the evidence or not. So we couldn't say this was a personality clash or somebody doesn't like me. But it also enabled that when you've got evidence, you've got something to sit down with the student and actually discuss the learning they took from that process. So it's not just about putting stuff into a portfolio, it's what did you learn from doing X, Y, and Z. So out of all of that, we came up with an agreed structure. People very much wanted a personal profile at the beginning of PAD so that the people supporting the student in practice could actually be able to relate to that person a little bit more by knowing their context, their background. So if we want people to be person-centred, we need to be person-centred in how we support students. Obviously things like inductions were sought. And very much there was a request for a learning plan to be put in, that students looked at where they were going to go out into practice, saw what learning opportunities were there, provisionally planned that, and then when they came in to practice with the supervisor, would sit down and kind of confirm up that learning plan. And in the consultation events we've had since developing our draft with students, that's come through as a very positive element. We talked about the evidence, and we need to have our records of discussion, so we were able to develop those by reviewing what we currently do across the 3 universities, looking what was happening across the UK for the NIPEC and the new standards, and being able to bridge a lot of that together. There was very much a strong request for being able to put in action plans, particularly around things like underachievement or concerns, and being able to address that on the spot and formally, so that there would be evidence of those issues more explicit than there is in the current portfolios that we're experiencing in practice. And again, the draft of that has been very positively received by students and by current mentors, in that it addresses the issue, but it also puts a very solid plan in place to deal with it. Nursing procedures, again, how to set those out, how to evidence them, how to look at them and break them down into components where necessary to make it clear what people should be able to do. And again, there was a lot of requests for saying, well, we know where to write something when somebody starts, or when we do a midway review, or at the end, but if something really good happens, or the student does something really fantastic and I want to record that, where can I record it? So we've added that in. Plus, people had said, well, if there was repeated concerns about somebody, I don't want to wait to the particular assessment or review point, I want to be able to document that, so we've been able to enable that as well. Most, I suppose, unique about the PAD in terms of what we currently do, and which is very now common across the 4 PADs across the UK, was the assessment of professional values and practice. And this came through very strongly in the survey, particularly from the lay people who responded. Things around attitude, appearance, motivation to learn, etc. And so we have been able to adopt what's been used in the other 4 countries with some slight amendments to be able to deal with that on an ongoing basis. And again, that was very positively reviewed in our stakeholder engagement since development. And we've also developed service user feedback process, building on work that we've done with service user reference groups in the past, engaging with the Public Health Agency, Patient Client Council, etc., to develop it as well. So in terms of our draft, we've developed our draft and we've had then a series of consultations, first with the universities and the professional officers, to make sure that this PAD is not something that's sitting in isolation of the curriculum and won't work alongside and synergistically with the curriculum. We've had a subsequent stakeholder engagement with the chairs of the other working groups, because we realise that it's integrated, that the work of the other working groups really feeds in, and that it's not something that's just completely owned by ourselves and our work group. We've liaised with the PAD developers across the other 3 countries, which has been fantastic. They've been very, very supportive in sharing their work and in us sharing our work, and that's led to a number of discussions about different aspects of what we're doing. And then we had probably what was felt like the most important one to me anyway, was the stakeholder engagement with the current mentors and students, whose voice is really, really important to be heard in all of this. Again, which was very overwhelmingly endorsing of the PAD, and it gave us some small things that we needed to tweak, which were easy to respond to, but also gave us some things to address wider across the Future Nurse, Future Midwife programme of work. And then recently, the programme board have endorsed the process that we have taken. So we're very pleased with the work to date, recognising that there is still work to be done. So what are our next steps? Well, we need now to take a very hard look at the PAD from the different field specific adaptations that are needed. So we very much led on the adult nursing field initially, recognising that that will then have to be diversified for the different fields, and that we will need a specific work stream subgroup for midwifery once we have those standards, but also to take on the unique nature of midwifery going into the future. We need to focus now on developing our handbook to support the PAD, now that we've kind of got the core principles in place and agreed. And then we're setting up a separate subgroup for an electronic version in terms of what kind of platform solution that we could do to maybe move forward and see how feasible it would be to have this hosted maybe on a cloud server for students and be more mobile, etc., and accessible. And of course, all of this is in pursuit of our being ready for Gateway 1 parts and for Gateway 2. So we're really trying to target getting front-loading much of this development for April, the end of April 2019. So that's where we are for the PAD, and we of course have future work to come, and we'll be very excited to get it finished and for you all to see it and for it to be integrated into practice. So thank you. So.